So why don't we get started? My name is Karl Hakkarainen, and, excuse me, and I'm going to be talking about a multisyllabic word, techno-determinism. For that, a little bit about me. So my wife and I live on Queen Lake in Phillipston, Mass. Feel free to send me a note if you want to do, any follow-up conversation or anything like that. By way of background, and whenever I come to the campus, I'm always reflective of that. My father worked construction first on starting in the early '60s when they were building Southwest, and then on this building, on the Graduate Research Center over here. And for a time, I attended UMass, and so we would steal alcohol out of Guestman and drink it and not die. In spite of our best efforts. I'm a retired IT professional. I left workforce in 2017, and a nearly 40-year career before that. But my deep background is I was an American Studies major, finished at Amherst College, but also had a bunch of other jobs. So I worked at and some of you who are older may remember McManus is down the way, an all-night diner. Worked the graveyard shift there for several years. So, long connection to the valley, long love of this area. And Queen Lake is a place my father built it after World War II, and so I was there before I was born, so in long connection with that property. This talk came about for a couple of reasons, or a couple of genesis points. One was, and for the last 10 or so years, I've been teaching senior education programs in Worcester, Massachusetts, at Assumption University, a group called Worcester Institute for Senior Education, WISE. And last fall, I did a course on the Luddites, and so relied on Brian Merchant's book, which came out like 1 week before the course started. So I was scrambling to read that. I'd already done a bunch of preparation on that. And he talks about that, and the research in some of my background research also led to this topic. Then when we were getting ready to do the summit, David Weinberger, David and I have known each other for 25 years. We were a member of an email discussion group that was started by a mutual friend. So we've known each other for a long time, and as we were getting ready, we were talking with Rick Hood, one of the co-founders of Nerd Summit, about what David was going to be talking about. I came up with the idea of talking about techno-determinism, which is, again, a long word that means a lot of things to a lot of people. One of the things that it is also an anagram for Christ-intoned meme. So you can have some fun with that. Douglas Adams, who wrote all 6 books of the Hitchhiker's Guide trilogy, talked about technology as we approach it, that anything that is there when we're born is part of the natural order of things. So we don't think of a pair of scissors as technology. We don't think of eyeglasses as technology. We didn't think of television as technology. It was just there, part of the fabric, just like trees and dogs and our parents. Stuff that arrives, as we get older is new and cool and energizes us. And then after a certain point, it's, I don't want to do this, get off my lawn. And so somehow in all of this is the notion that technology continues to become a part of our lives, whether we're intentional about it or not. We get imbued with it as we are growing up and just take certain things for granted, and we then discover new things that are new and cool, and depending on when you arrive at that point, it can be anything from I remember uh, uh, one of the very few predictions that I ever got right. I was working for Digital Equipment Corporation at the time, and probably only a few of you may have known that it was the second largest computer company in its day. But I was working for them, and through our internal network, this crazy new thing called Mosaic became available. I had to compile it myself, run it on my workstation, and all of a sudden I had access to this thing called the World Wide Web. This is probably 1993. And I said to myself, this is going to be big. It was one of the very few predictions that I've ever gotten right in my life. The other was getting married and staying with my wife for a long time. But the most of my predictions about my future have been way off. But this one I got right. This one actually arrived when I was in my 40s, but it was so compelling, and it changed everything. And it took a while for things to for people to recognize, but not a very long time. So that from 1993 to the end of the decade, to 2000, all of a sudden, the web is here, and the web becomes synonymous with the internet and interchangeable with the web, the internet. And shortly after that, come the smartphones and all of that, being propelled forward. And so we are presented with this wave of technology that is subsumed most of our lives. So there are notions about this that then start to look at big pictures. So we have Kevin Kelly, who was one of the founding editors of Wired magazine, and one of the big thinkers. He wrote a book, called 2010, I think it was, on what technology wants, and he equated the evolution of technology with the evolution of from a biological sense, that there are ways in which technology keeps moving and changing. And just like in biology, there are branches and there are false starts and there are improvements, but it's relentless. Biological evolution has been relentless. So too, according to Kelly and some others, technological evolution has been relentless. And one of the ways in which it's conveyed is through the term meme, which was coined by Richard Dawkins, likening it to genes, likening it to the way in which DNA propels itself through biology. He coined the term meme and memetics to talk about the way ideas propel themselves through our lives in our world. So these things become part of who we are and what we do and how we do it. In the early 1950s, and then the translation in English came in early 1960s. A French sociologist by the name of Jacques Ellul talked about technique, and his technique was not about just a methodology, a technique for painting or a technique for drumming or a technique for anything. It was the idea of how you structure an organization, how you structure your ideas, how you structure your activities. And so this notion of technique also takes on a ubiquity that is relentless, unavoidable. And he was writing, again, right after World War II, just as computers were starting to become significant, just as telecommunications were starting to become significant. Another person who picked up on this, of course, is Marshall McLuhan, and noticing the ubiquity of the technology that was taking over our world and our minds. We were changing, we were adapting. Henry David Thoreau talked about the way men become their tools. That we become so not only dependent, but aligned with and entangled with the tools we have. I was on the way out here. I was listening to Kara Swisher's new book, and she talked about we grab our phones first thing when we get up in the morning, and it's the last thing we put down at night. That these have become extensions of who we are extensions of our brain, extensions of our speech, extension of our eyes and ears and everything. That and even this can track my sleep. So how well did I sleep last night? Not only how long did I sleep, but how long was I awake, and when was I in deep sleep and REM sleep and all of that. And this is only going to get more and more profound. So it's become ubiquitous. As I read Yulu's book and the others, it became clear to me that our choices are fewer and fewer in terms of being able to stop and sometimes even redirect the way tech is going. I'm not sure how I feel about that, because most of my career, for the last 45 years, has been deeply involved in technology, deeply involved in the way in which we communicate. Remembering, in the mid 1980s, working with a team at DEC, there were two people in the States, two in England and one in France, and we had a project to get done, and we got it done. And it was by email and conference calls and stuff like that. And we got it done. We got it on time. And my biggest problem at that point was how to pay bonuses in pounds sterling, dollars, and francs, because that part of the business hadn't evolved in the same way that the communications within the company had evolved. So business has changed, and with it we change. And what does that mean, and how do we do it? So that leads to the next question: the entanglement with capitalism. And this is something that many folks have pointed out, and this is where it starts to get even more complicated, because when we look at the cool technology that has been developed, the ideas that Larry Page and Sergey Brin came up with in terms of developing the search engine, and what it took to make that happen was a whole lot of money, a whole lot of investors. Stanford is getting so rich out of its investment because there are grad students at Stanford, and so they held on to some of the intellectual property, and so they're getting very, very wealthy as the result of Google's success, as are many other people. So that is the question that I pose to all of us. What do we need? Is the entanglement of money and power necessary for this technology to keep going? And how does that change the dynamic? So any thoughts on that as we go forward?
Yeah. Um, I feel that the the ads and everything that are now popping up everywhere. I mean, to the point where you can't even scroll down a page without having to cancel all these ads. And I think that that damages the usability of whatever service that you're using. And I think that that will start turning people away from some of those technologies.
A good point. Yeah.
I think that I think that um, invention and wealth are definitely connected. Definitely 100% invention and power are connected. And I think that wealth and power are connected, but I don't think that all three technically need to overlap.
Okay.
Because wealth can bring power, and you can crowdsource people who don't have a lot of power to bring wealth to an invention.
Hmm. Okay. Um, so back there.
I would have to agree with that point, but most definitely the strong, the thing that supports an invention the most would be that wealth part, though, because you could have loads of people that want something to happen, but if the people behind it don't have the wealth to stay sustained while working on the project, that project's just gonna fall flat.
But it's not, as we know, it's not just wealth, because there have been wealthy um, investments in certain technologies that fall flat because the tech just isn't good enough, or something else. Again, forgive me for dating myself, but the Betamax versus VHS videotapes. Betamax was backed by Sony. VHS was backed by a consortium. Betamax was a higher quality video recording system, but the way in which VHS got going, they were smarter marketers. Let's put it that way. And similarly, Microsoft in its background. But I don't mean to talk. There were some other hands. Yeah.
I don't think that invention needs to be tied to wealth and power. I think that what invention needs, obviously, is creativity, but mostly is freedom and time. I think the reason that it is yoked to wealth and power is because in our society, time is purchased with money. Your time is not your own if you can't afford to feed yourself.
Okay.
However, I think that the one part that you're never going to escape is, let's say you invent a thing and it's wonderful and it's great and everyone who uses it loves it. If you can't get the word out, it's never going to be anything.
Mm-hmm.
And to that end, I think you can't really escape at least the wealth part because you need to advertise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
I 100% agree. I wanted to raise my hand, but I want to give other folks
Sure.
a chance to talk. It's the complexity of wealth. Like, wealth isn't necessarily money by itself. Wealth can also be wealth in time. Like, you have the time and availability. Wealth in knowledge. Wealth in health. There's plenty of people who have great ideas, but due to various ailments, they either don't have the time or are constantly trying to manage their health that they can't put in the time to invent. So wealth and all of its complexities is incredibly important for invention. So 100% on the point of having time to invent.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Well, it just seems to be like when a society relies on capitalism, it's ultimately going to invest in technology going to that's going to help them get the maximum profit for as low cost as possible. Like that's why we're seeing machines and especially AI coming to such prominence. Like all across the video game industry right now, they're just layoffs left and right across major triple A companies. And my suspicion is that it's because AI is one of these companies to create games without having to pay as many artists or designers. Just having a few people type in prompts in the AI and spitting out a product. I think it's ultimately going to be cheaper for them because, of course, corporations love to pay workers a living wage and benefits. That's sarcasm. But yeah, I think the big technology, like at the end of the day, I mean, I think there is going to be some kind of capitalistic interest in the advanced technology, and I think that's going to come at the cost of the the well-being and dignity of the human laborer.
Thank you. A couple of good points. Get back to. One is that the dignity issue, the human dignity, is a profound challenge in all of this. The other that I was thinking about, and going back to the arms race post World War II, but now we have countries such as so state funded developments out of North Korea, out of Russia, out of China, where instead of capitalists funding it, it's the state. But the effect is the same. The influx of money allowing people to do stuff and to learn and build, ultimately for the purposes of a different type of warfare. Yeah, David. Yeah.
So you said, and I were of an age, and
Yes.
I agree with you that the web was a really important invention. Does that need wealth and power? Clearly, what it's become, there are dominant things on it require a great deal of wealth and power, but the web still maintains itself underneath that, even without the. Is the web an exception to this? Is archive.org programming languages that have grown up without wealth and power that are now dominant? Drupal?
That's a really good point. That there are significant places in which major wealth is not required. So crowdfunding Wikipedia, crowdfunding open source projects, crowdfunding going back to the web, where Tim Berners-Lee famously did not claim intellectual property rights. He could have been wealthier than everybody, but he turned it loose for free, and we are the beneficiaries of that. Just like the work of Linus Torvalds, the work on Linux, turning that loose for free, has enabled, depending on how you do the math, probably at least half, if not more than half, of the servers running in this world. So there are exceptions, and we need to note those exceptions and perhaps rally with them if that is our choice, or we may choose to follow the path of the wealthy. Yeah, there are a couple. Yeah, back.
This slide just makes me think of OpenAI. I mean, that's like, it's such a profound example of wealth and power, because I think there's 6, maybe 7 people who literally, I mean, if you look at like Nvidia today, it's like becoming one of the biggest companies, and Microsoft is blown up just because of like these 6 people that had a ton of money and a ton of power. And the idea is, let's just like large language models, this idea maybe existed for, I don't know, tens of years, but to say we just need a bunch of servers, and we need a lot of money to run them and a lot of power to arrange all of that, and it just like 6 people who happen to be wealthy and powerful managed to, or 7, I don't remember, managed to do that. And this this is a wild example of that our entire world is almost ubiquitous with that AI.
Yeah. Okay, you had a question, then back to.
So actually, now that you said that, that does bring my mind to something like the concentration of the power, at least for a lot of the development, is kind of getting scarily narrow. Like, let's just say the S&P 500, for example. Over half of the growth in it, most of them are currently going down. Over half of the growth of it is in two companies, Microsoft and Nvidia. And I feel like that's generally a very dangerous sign that if all like over half of all of the the profits are all at these just two companies, then that just means that more small companies that might have better ideas don't exactly have any room to get in there because these two big companies are the ones taking everything, buying out everything, and generally it could stop some progress to an extent.
That's the nature of capitalism.
Yeah.
Though of course we can't exactly neglect that like the government also drives a lot of that. Like let's just say during the space race, for example, there was the two powers, the U.S. and the USSR, both they try pushing for like development in space technology, just because they were scared of the other side having a one up on them. And like how much profit have we gotten from the moon exactly?
Not a lot of profit with the moon, but we got the internet.
I was gonna say, well, for folks who need to look brief,
Yeah.
I was gonna say for the AI point, I think that is definitely a topic on wealth, but very much on power, because it's like what you're saying of everything narrowing down. I think it's, in a way, it's definitely power increasing for those companies, but I think it's more so power being taken away from individuals. Something that I talked about a lot when I was still in my MS program was about true consent, and how a lot of our technology, we don't have true consent, both from lack of techno-literacy, understanding what the technology is. So if you don't understand it, how can you consent? And more so that individual or user consent is being taken away. And that's where the point I wanted to make about wealth is, yes, 6 individuals with a ton of money, but they're also profiting off of the wealth of every person on the internet, putting their wealth of knowledge, putting their creativity online. If people did not do that, or if they lost access to any of that, and I mean any of it, so much of their AI models would just fail horrifically and hilariously.
Yeah, like David.
Just a quick point, because what people are saying seems to me really correct and important, but I'm back on technologies that grew and prospered without power and wealth, and would have kept going even with that, which all seem to me to be enabling technologies, as is the transformer model, which Google invented, put out as open source, and is largely responsible for the large language models, just like 5 years ago. So that by a very powerful source, of course, but that contribution into and our what we contributed to the internet that trained these models is also something that is a free and enabling technology. So maybe there's a distinction between enabling technologies and then the ones that are directly susceptible to power and wealth.
Okay, thank you, David. Yeah, go ahead.
So we've focused a lot on thinking about techno-determinism, meaning where is the future of technology, where is it going, and how much of a choice do we have. We're focused a lot on capital and capitalist interests, and that makes sense because we see the push to the cloud or the forced eviction to the cloud is very much profit-driven. But I think that aside from the wealth side of things, there's also kind of an innate desire in the people creating just creating technology in general, including all the free stuff, of where that technology is headed. And I wonder how much control we have over that.
That's that's what we're trying to get at, in this brief conversation today, is how much control do we have? Do you have a, yeah.
Yeah, so just pivoting off what both of you talked about, open technologies. So I'm 40 and I've had my entire career because of open source technologies. So I grew up as a teenager building websites, and so yeah, and so I think it's the technologies exist. but we are also humans using the technologies, and what wealth is buying is the ability to skew the attention of the audience, right? Because we are not, you know, for me, I use these technologies because they're tools with which to spread knowledge and ideas and communications, right? And so the investment that I see in open source communities that I'm involved in is based on usage, and is based on how people are using the tools to communicate. And but wealth is has the ability to skewer the attention so that yeah, we can build all the things in the world, but we don't have access to an audience. We're not in the same playing field for access to an audience or access to a community to share the fruits of using these tools.
Good point. I'm also paying attention to the time, because the last thing that I want to do is stand between you and lunch. So pivoting it a little bit, we look at a couple of people who have fought the fight against technology, in some cases stealing jobs. Most of you have heard the term Luddite. It goes back to a mythical person by the name of Ned Ludd, who was a weaver the real person was probably in the late 1700s in England, but the Luddite movement got its going in the early 1800s in England, where they were called machine breakers, because they physically destroyed the weaving machines that were stealing jobs and producing lower quality fabrics in northern England. And they were brutally repressed by the English government, who sent in the British Army, at a time when they were also fighting the Napoleonic Wars. But they brought in people, hung many of them, sent several of them off to Australia for exile forever, to Botany Bay, and they became pretty much a footnote of history until about 1990 or so, when a neo-Luddite movement started to emerge. There was in fact a second Luddite conference held in the 1990s out in Ohio. There's not even certainty that there was a first Luddite conference in England, but they decided to have a second one that's at least the spiritual connector to the original Luddite movement, with the idea of resisting technology and technological movements, not surprisingly affiliated with the Amish, because the Amish have a very interesting approach to technological advances. They right now, they have, electric bikes, and the electric bikes are powered by solar system, but the communities are not connected to the electric grid because they don't trust it. So it's a way in which you approach technology for its utility, but you also want to preserve your community. You also want to be able to stay close. So there was a humorous. Many of you remember last summer there was a national alarm that went out on all cell phones. I forget when it was, but at 2:30 in the afternoon, every cell phone started buzzing. It turns out that a couple of Amish young men had smuggled cell phones into their clothes and got busted by the Amish elders for having this prohibited device, again, that was threatening to invade their community. So so that's anyway. So the Luddites became part of lore, and fast forward, and you will often hear the accusation of anybody who doesn't like smartphones, or it doesn't like, this. My brother-in-law, raised his hand when I was talking about this. So they wanted to cut down on their cable bill, and they learned that you could get one with a new over-the-air antenna. But the new over-the-air antenna required that he get a new TV set, because the old one that he had, which is an old analog TV set, wouldn't work with this new antenna. So they had to go out and get a new smart TV in order to get something for free. And it was, so anyway, so that was that. Another person who fought, ultimately a losing battle, but an interesting one, against technology was Ted Kaczynski, aka the Unabomber. His solution was to mail pipe bombs to people whom he considered to be part of this technological industrial complex. And for a long time, he was on the FBI's most wanted list. Finally caught in Montana because he had written this lengthy manifesto, which was published in the 1990s by the Washington Post and a couple of other publications. And his brother recognized the writing style. Actually, his sister-in-law recognized the writing style and brought it to his brother, and they said, okay, this sounds like Ted. And that led to him getting identified and then later caught, and he spent a long time in jail and died in jail last summer. So his solution was blow the damn thing up. And in that sense, he is true to the Luddite tradition, because he, like they, thought violence was the only way to cleanse society. The rest of his manifesto, irrespective of what he was talking about with regard to technology, he's I would say he's a loathsome creature from my perspective, not only for blowing people up, but also for some of his ideological things. But be that as it may, he was connected to the Luddite tradition. And so the Luddites, as Molly Crabapple noted, and looking at technology critically. And one of the ways that we look at it critically, and we've been discussing it, is, what can we do with open source? What can we do with things, Richard Stallman spoke at a nerd summit probably 5 or 6 years ago, and he's a zealot with a capital Z in terms of his perspective on open source and being able to inspect everything you have, and he's a hard person to like up close, but he's not wrong. And so he identifies the value of technology. He also identifies the need for human connection, human control, human engagement with that, so that you have some responsibility to preserve this and extend this and make it your own, but also be part of an open source community. We talked a bit about AI and how that is changing things. So, and changing in ways that we don't really know yet. We have, my youngest granddaughter is just finishing her first year in college down in North Carolina. And I talked with her and her friends about how is AI changing their education. And right now, the schools are not sure. Most of it is a defensive action. Don't do that. Don't have AI write your papers for you. But I also know that AI is going to change everyone's job. Whether you like it or not, it's going to change it. It's going to change it in hiring. It's going to change it in operations. People are going to lose their jobs as a result of it. People are going to gain jobs as a result of it. It's going to be as much of a disruptor, if not more so, than the web was. And the web was a major disruptor there. Yeah.
So this is just more of a thought. I was. Turns out that J.R.R. Tolkien's Lords of Rings books were partially protests against the Industrial Revolution. So I was thinking about how it seems like AI is essentially our industrial revolution, currently major turning point in the way things are done in our society.
Yeah. And I think that the way in which the creative forces will respond to, react to, and perhaps even rebel against, the advancement of AI is going to be really something to watch. This is one of the things that keeps me going. I'm fascinated by this stuff, even though I've long passed my working career. I love seeing what is happening because it's so. This is a major point. I've been saying for a long time now, many of the jobs that I had don't exist anymore. Most of the jobs that the students in this group will have don't exist yet. So get ready for a wild ride. Yep.
Just wanted to add to the point that you made about there being response to AI. I'm an artist and I'm kind of seeing within the art community AI generated art and how some artists are how a lot of artists are against the use of AI and you're seeing a lot of just a lot of pushback against AI within the
Yeah, it's going to be a major disruptor, as will neural implants. And if this is the latest effort by Elon Musk to literally get inside our heads. Yeah.
So somebody just mentioned the whole how artists aren't happy with the AI art generators. Actually, I've heard of something recently that sounds very interesting. Apparently, there's these things now, these websites and stuff and software that artists sometimes put their art through, and somehow it poisons the art to the point where
Right.
no joke.
Yeah. So you can embed things to ensure that
It's unusable.
your content is managed, but it also does, and I'm going to wrap up in just a minute. It gives me the opportunity to create an image like this, where because I couldn't find an appropriate image that had the usage rights that I wanted to employ, and so, in a few moments with a prompt on this is Bing Image Creator, get something that is reasonably good. Is it high art? Of course not. But is it better than I can do? Absolutely, leagues better. And so that becomes the standard. It allows a person with no artistic talent to become reasonably competent, and ultimately may make some really good artists excel because they can do things. We have about a half a minute. Any last thoughts before we break for lunch? Yes, sir.
So I remember before, it was mentioned, that like about like open source and how like a lot of like you don't need like the power and such and money and such to produce a good product. Yeah, a lot of that open source technology though that is that quality then goes to making these like giants produce better technology. Like Microsoft, for instance, they use Linux, which Linux was like originally a project that an individual made.
Exactly. And most of Google and Facebook are running, at its core, running on Linux. It's 11:15. We need to adjourn. Glad to continue the conversation. But thank you all. This is wonderful for me, and I hope it worked well for you.